Hi, Dan. Thank you so much for making the time. Let's dive right in. Please introduce SickSet Media. What do you do? Who do you help? And who is the team?
Yeah, so we are a multifaceted marketing and PR agency specifically for the rock and metal genre. We work on a global basis. We started in the UK with just little old me being a freelancer. I started to do that due to requests from other bands that I played with at the time when I was in my former band Borders. That's since disbanded, and I've just grown the agency. So all of the energy and passion that I was putting into my band at the time I'm now putting into this agency, and it's going really well. We're growing. There's lots of word of mouth in terms of where the vast majority of our clients come from now. So we must be doing something right.
Sounds perfect. So you have a hands-on experience of like being in a band and what's involved, I guess the contacts as well. So that's very
Yeah,
handy. I imagine you offer quite a few different packages and services. What would you say is your most popular one?
probably Meta. So out of the three packages for those out there that don't know what we do PR and radio plugging. We also do YouTube ads, which is through Google, and we do Meta ads, which is, of course, Facebook and Instagram. Our most common and popular service is by quite a lot Meta. The reason for that is you can pick many different objectives. So we can run campaigns to sell merchandise, providing that we have warmed up data from the band's pixel, or we can just push to DSPs and test various creatives. Nowadays, the vast majority of people consuming media are doing it on social media. So there's no better place to be running ads than on social media, in particular through Instagram.
Mm. Does it change quite a lot, kind of the algorithms and how things work? Do you have to constantly keep up with the latest
Oh,
trends?
yeah. Meta changes its UI all of the time, which can be quite frustrating. But what they're currently talking about, they've not fully implemented it yet as of today's date. But they are talking about the idea of not just for the music industry, but just for running ads on Facebook and Instagram in general, completely eliminating the option of targeting and just allowing Meta's AI to pick who it thinks will purchase or will complete
Mm-hmm.
the conversion that you set for it. But it's also taking it a step further and suggesting that if somebody had a product, so let's say that we were selling, I don't know, a new energy drink or something like that, you give Meta a picture of that energy drink, it will then go away and create advertisement content for that. So AI will make video advertisement content of the energy drink and still images, etc. And then it will create ads for you and target for you, which is pretty scary because that kind of implies that my job may become irrelevant, but I'm staying optimistic for now.
No, definitely. Surely there has to be a choice what like you can use it like that, but you should be able to, do it yourself as well. We'll
Mm,
see. You never
we
know
will
these
see.
days.
Yeah.
Do you think traditional media still matter as much as social media these days, kind of impact wise for breaking a band, advertising a band?
I think it does. Certainly. I think that we've developed and evolved into a different way in which the vast majority of people consume media, but social media provides in a completely different way to how traditional press and radio coverage covers. So back in the day in the 80s or the 70s, press and radio was the only way in which a band could go and promote their music. Whereas now there's just many more options, which actually makes it a little more confusing for bands because, especially grassroots bands, they have a limited budget and they need to know where is the best place to put that money. Normally, I typically suggest, and this is very generic and not tailored to a specific band with respect to what they've got going on surrounding branding, ticket sales, streams, and things like that. Normally, if it's a developing artist, I will recommend digital marketing first because I think it's important for you to have a small but loyal fan base behind your music before you start to try and push out to your Kerangs and your Metal Hammers and things like that, because it's fundamentally important for a band to have at least a small group of people that are invested in their music, that want to buy tickets, that want to buy merchandise, that want to listen to their music every day before you do go off to those bigger medias asking for
Mm.
reviews. for me, it seems crazy to want to do that the other way around. But
Mm.
again, that's a generic answer to your question, but it really is specific to the individual band.
Maybe that's a bit of kind of self-confidence, you know. We don't have
Mm.
fans yet, but our music is so great that
Oh, you'd
we
be
definitely.
surprised. There are a lot of bands that do it. I see a lot of bands that have ran through PR
Mm,
companies because we're quite unique in the sense that we do digital marketing and PR. The vast majority of PR companies just do PR and radio plugging and nothing
mm,
beyond that. So for that reason, when they get an inquiry, they're not going to say to the band, "Oh, it would be better if you went down the digital marketing route," because they don't offer
mm,
that as a service. So, of course, they will say, "Great, we're happy to, depending
mm,
on the PR agency, we're happy to take your money and run this campaign for you." But it's not
mm,
always the best first step for that band.
mm. That makes sense. Your tagline is we generate fans, not just numbers.
Yes.
So how do you do that? How do you achieve that? And what would you say is your definition of a fan in 2026?
Um, we call them super fans. So a definition of a fan is somebody that is going to go to a show,
Mm,
proactively listens to a band multiple times throughout the week, month, etc. Would at least consider buying merchandise from that band because they're into them enough to do so. That's someone that really matters. Someone that is a passive streamer that has come across the playlist and listened to a band while they're, I don't know, at some social event and they've just said, "Hey, play metal playlist," and you've got some generic metal playlist playing in the background and your band is played, no one's going to continue listening to you and become a fan of that music because it was very passive. And
mm,
we've seen with the data that we've got, we have over 100 bands now with access to their Spotify for artists in terms of our clientele, and we can see when bands have gone to playlisting services to try and kind of bump their numbers up. And it's always very passive. It can
mm,
affect the algorithm in a very negative way if those playlists are multi-genred. And of course, many of these playlists are known to just be riddled with bots. So there are a lot of services out there that are playlisting services where, yeah, you can get a, a brief um, fluctuation of your streams on Spotify for 50 quid or whatever, and you can get put on 10 different playlists,
mm,
but it will all drop off very quickly. And it's very noticeable to those that do work in the
mm,
industry. What we're working to achieve are real people that are real listeners that are going to take action. I'm going to get a little bit nerdy on you real quick, but one of the ways in which we do that, and all marketing agencies do that, irrespective of genre or even industry, is via something called a pixel.
mm,
And I don't mean a little pixel on an image. This is a pixel that is a snippet of code that goes onto a website. So what we do when we run these campaigns is we put that little snippet of code on the page that we're sending people to. When people land on that page, we gather their data, so we get their IP and all of their information, and we put it in a little custom audience. Now, why that's beneficial is we're able to build an audience of people that have previously expressed an interest in that band and their music. So we know that they're familiar with the band, so that we can now nurture them. We can send more ads to them when the next single comes out. We can tell them when a merch drop happens. We can tell them when that band are going to come to their town and play a show. So we can create direct experiences for those individual people that we know we've managed to hook at the
mm,
beginning and continue to nurture them so they become a real fan of that band. They're not someone that just listens once and disappears. We nurture them to become a real fan of the artist. And that's how we approach all of our digital marketing.
That's very handy, kind of in-depth look as well at what the fans are. Um, according to the data you're seeing, what do fans want at the moment? And how does an artist convert followers and subscribers into actual gig attendance, say?
Um, for the most part, it's about building a community. So for bands now, because it's so easy to produce music and social media has made it very easy to share music, they're all really useful tools, but very few bands know how to use those tools correctly. Those that do very well. Um, and in terms of turning people that is just a follower on Instagram into somebody that feels connected to the band, It's difficult to do from an organic perspective, but the best way to do that is to try and build a community around the band. And the way to do that is, again, and I know that bands hate it. They always tell me they don't want to do TikTok dances on TikTok, but it's about utilizing social media in a way that engages your existing fan base and potentially new people where they want to be involved with the music. Because, and it's a terrible example, and I might get some shtick for this, but if you just post when you're going to play a show, when you're going to release a new song, and your music and image consists of dressing all black, going into a forest and playing generic metalcore, you're not going to do very well
Mm.
because it's been overdone a million times. And for people to really want to engage with you, connect with you, and become a real fan, then they need to feel like they're a part of an audience and a community that you're at the heart of. And you can't do that by just posting, we're playing a show tomorrow, we're dropping a new song tomorrow. You need to be more creative and immersive with the content that you are putting together so that you're creating discussions and you're creating a community.
Yeah, because and that will depend obviously on your whole vibe and the genre as well. I
Yeah,
guess different.
massively.
Um, would you say what is the best way to kind of stay connected and with that community? Is this WhatsApp groups, like Discord channels or mailing lists?
I always recommend mailing lists. So we don't offer it as a service, but I've said to so many bands nowadays there are so many of these tools that are free. So the number one is Mailchimp. That's the most common one, but there are so many competitors, many of which are either free or cheap, depending on how many people you add to your list. What every single band should be doing is having a little laminated QR code on their merch table. So whenever they play a show or whenever they play a festival, they have some sort of little incentive, like you get a little wristband if you scan the QR code and fill in your details and add yourself to our mailing list. Equally, we can run that through. So when I was talking about remarketing audiences, we can run campaigns to those people that we've started to nurture to try and take them to that next step of giving their email details over so that we can market to them directly through the newsletters. And of course, that helps in terms of building that community, giving that sense of value. Because again, irrespective of sort of business type, the main point of newsletters, as we've all experienced, is to give you sort of offers and discounts and things like that. So giving those what we would call super fans that are a part of that mailing list special privileges of being able to access exclusive content or get special discounts or exclusivity to specific merch drops or vinyl drops and things like that is really useful in terms of building that community and nurturing to that next level those super fans.
It keeps coming out that the email is kind of the most reliable, I guess, tool in case something happens with the platform. You have all these people kind of, saved in a different place. And
Yeah,
it just seems so almost outdated, the email, just the concept of email, but it seems to be still kind of the most solid in there.
it's very underrated. It's very underrated, and honestly, it's quite easy to use. It's most
Yeah.
of it's just drag and drop. Yeah, it's very underrated by bands. But again, similarly to the whole, I don't want to be on TikTok doing
Mm.
TikTok
Maybe
dances.
it's not
Bands just
cool
want to
enough.
be. Well, that it's not that it is that is a part of it, but it's also most musicians just want to sit with their friends and write cool riffs. They don't want to sit curating and segmenting a newsletter and putting something together and sending that out, especially if they've only got 200 people on their newsletter to
Mm.
begin with. But it's the growth that really matters, and you have to start somewhere. And unfortunately, the harsh truth is, if your band isn't doing it, there are thousands of bands that are. So you're at a disadvantage if you're not fulfilling all of these, what are almost becoming requirements to develop nowadays.
And I guess even looking at myself, kind of, I feel like in emails, it's more maybe reach or visibility because the feed updates so fast on Instagram. Sometimes you miss
Mm-hmm.
like updates and posts, and an email, at least myself, like I check at least once a day, kind of regularly. You see it. It's not gonna skip unless it goes into spam or something like that. But
Yeah.
it's a bit more there for you. In terms of kind of shift that you might have noticed in the past couple of years? Do you notice people move into different platforms or kind of music platforms? I know many Gen Zs live in Meta altogether and Spotify as well, kind of due to the conditions for artists. Where are they moving to if you've seen such a shift?
Um, the vast majority of success that I've seen from bands that have come out of the woodwork organically is through TikTok. So I know that we've kind of covered this a little bit, but the algorithm on TikTok is very different to Instagram. It's much more forgiving. It's also a bit of a sandbox, so any content really goes. It doesn't need to be super polished. When Instagram came out, it was considered to be a platform where you're expected to have loads of filters, really polished videos or photos, etc. And it has moved away from that a little bit as it's tried to become a competitor to TikTok with reels and stories. But for the most part, Instagram is more of a platform for polished content. And of course, bands cannot keep up with creating well polished content on a daily basis. They haven't got the funds or the time to do that. If it's your full time job and you're a millionaire, brilliant, you can do that all day long. But the vast majority of these bands aren't. And that also makes TikTok such a prime platform for those that just want to make raw, engaging, relatable content that wins people over. I think Dead Pony are a really good example. If you're familiar with them, they played Slam Dunk.
Mm-hmm.
Recently watched them; they were absolutely fantastic. But they, amongst many other bands, really adopted social media. That, and of course, having fantastic and very, very
Mm-hmm.
catchy music. But they adopted social media in such a way where they were able to hook people over through both relatability and humor. So they did a lot of content where they're in a rehearsal room together and it would sort of zoom in on people's reactions and there'd be a little
Mm-hmm.
caption that would make it comical, but whilst having their music in the background the entire time. So whilst it's entertaining to watch and it kind of brings you in a little bit in that community feel because it made you feel almost as if you were part of the rehearsal whilst you're watching that video. You're also listening to this insanely catchy chorus that they've thrown together, and you continue to scroll on your phone and you've still got that song stuck in your head. You're now going to go to Spotify and go and listen to it. And I think that the ability to be creative, and I know that it's not the creative that most musicians are looking for, but being more open minded to it, there is a lot of scope with TikTok to win people over with being creative in a slightly different way, with the aim of creating an audience and a community. And there are so many bands that have proven this concept in theory, and they've done some really fantastic things off the back of it. Another one, just very briefly, because I have to name drop them because they're a client of ours, is Struck Down.
Mm-hmm.
So Struck Down, not quite the success of Dead Pony, but they have done very, very well across Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, because they're posting like 3 or 4 times every day. And the content that they're posting is not super polished. They're just going for the relatable kind of vibe. So they'll say, if you're a fan of Mastodon, please watch this video just for 4 seconds, and hopefully the algorithm will kick it out to more people for us.
Mm-hmm.
And the video will be, the vocalist or the drummer just looking at the camera. It's the lowest effort stuff you've ever
Yeah.
seen, but it pulls on people's heartstrings with, oh, this is a developing band. And if I do just give them 3 seconds, this video will get pushed out to more people. And that is how it works, because all platforms, TikTok in particular, will push a video out if it can see that people are interested in it. So if a video goes out and there's lots of likes, there's lots of shares, and people are watching the full video or maybe even watching it twice, they're indicators to the algorithm within TikTok that this video is cool, people will like
Mm-hmm.
it, and it will start to push it out organically. Um,
Okay. So you only need 3 seconds for the algorithm to recognize
well, I
that.
don't know the specifics. That's an example of what they put on
Mm.
their videos. But yeah, I mean,
Mm.
retention is very important. So the longer the video is watched
Mm.
for, the more likely it will get pushed
Mm.
out.
Yeah, TikTok comes kind of repeatedly on top for discovery, and then you can like funnel people into different kind of platforms, I guess.
Yeah,
I need to install TikTok and actually see what's happening there. I'm kind of more on
it's
Instagram, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to limit the platforms, but just to get, familiar with it.
Oh, it's even worse for doom scrolling than Instagram is. So if you're a sucker for that,
Ugh.
I don't know. It's a
Maybe not.
risk.
I'll
Maybe
set a
not.
limit for me.
Yeah.
Let's talk money very quickly. I won't be asking you obviously like how much your packages are because I can imagine they're quite tailored and different to,
Yes.
depending on the goals and the artist. But what would you say is the biggest misconceptions bands have about marketing budgets, and does spending more money always leads to better results?
Not necessarily. So a there's a few misconceptions, and it's because of other companies like I was referring to earlier that offer things like playlisting and all this kind of stuff. So you can spend £50 on playlisting service and you might get a few streams that could be real people that like music.
Mm.
They could be people that are listening to a playlist that is multi-genred and a vast majority of those people don't like your music, or it could be bots. You don't really know. Um, if you are trying to run ads yourself, of course, people can do that. Um, and on some consultations I've had, I've actually encouraged it and provided sources on how you can go and learn. But we've been doing this for a really long time. We didn't learn it in 1 hour and then become an
Mm.
agency. It takes a long time to understand what does and doesn't work. How we run campaigns differently to your standard DIY artist is, as mentioned previously, setting up your pixel, ensuring that your conversion is set correctly with Meta so that it knows exactly what it needs to do. If you're a DIY band and you do not do this, and you set up a campaign where you are measuring a first click as a conversion,
Mm.
that's what you're defining as your conversion. At the minute, it's estimated that across Facebook and Instagram, around 40% of the traffic are bots. So if you tell Instagram and Facebook when you're running ads that you're happy with just an initial click, then you are opening yourself up to 40% of bot traffic being used up on that ad spend that you're running. So you are, by definition, if you haven't set up a campaign correctly, you are burning through 40% of your budget before you've
Mm.
even started to target anything correctly.
Wow.
Another thing that a lot of these bands do when they're running ads independently is pick one ad creative. So they'll get a cool bit from a music video that they've had put together that they all collectively think is cool amongst the
Mm.
4 or 5 people in the band, and they'll run that. We don't do that. We ask for a minimum of 5 different ad creatives,
Mm.
and we run all 5 at the same time to thousands of people. And then we look at who is engaging with which creatives because it is
Mm.
never the same. We could run an ad where we've got one creative that's £1 per conversion, and we could have another one that's going to the exact same audience, but it's at something like 20p per conversion. And it's because people are just gravitating more to that other ad creative. They think it's cooler, it looks cooler, it's a more interesting section of the track, so it's winning people over more. So we measure that as we go along throughout the month of a campaign. Whereas, as I say, independent bands will not set up the campaign correctly for conversions. They'll just set it up for clicks, and they will run one ad creative because they think it's cool. But in reality, we'll never really know because they're not comparing it to anything else.
Mm. Wow, that's quite a waste of 40%
Yeah.
if you do that. Um, how early should the artist come to you if they're planning a release of the EP, single, or album? How much time should they leave?
So that's a little bit tailored as well. If it's PR and it's an EP or an LP, we ask for the band to come to us at least 3 months in advance.
Mm.
If it's a single and it's just for PR, then we ask for the band to come to us at least 1 month in advance. If it's for digital marketing, then we ask for the band to come to us at least 2 weeks in advance. The reason for this is with digital marketing, we are working with data and nerdy setup.
Mm.
That can be achieved relatively quickly. With PR and radio plugging, we are dealing with people, and those people receive a lot of submissions on a daily basis. So we need to be respectful of their time. We cannot send a press release to them on just the day of release and
Mm.
expect them to drop everything and feature our artist. So we need a good amount of time beforehand to run up to the campaign.
That's great. And I want to run for a couple of case studies, kind of
Yeah,
very quickly because we have about 7 minutes left.
that's okay.
But the first one is, let's say we have a new band, new alternative band. They have great music and they have about EP's worth of music, but they kind of have under 100 followers on socials. They don't have any listeners on Spotify. They don't have any contacts. And they have around £500 to invest.
Mhm.
So, kind of, what would the first 90 days advice look like for them? What to focus on?
I'm gonna talk SickSet Media out of business in answering this question. I would probably invest firstly in yourself, probably to learn how the basics of how to run ads on Meta. So some of the stuff that I've spoken today
Mm.
um, are absolute requirements unless you want to burn money. And getting a campaign right the first time around in terms of a good cost per conversion, and seeing some real strong results in Spotify will take time for somebody to learn it. But until you start to get hands on with this stuff, you're never going to learn. So time to begin with, costs. I would suggest sinking around 300 of that into meta ads and the other 200 into creatives. So if there is any investment that can be made, whether you're hiring a small amount of space to just spend the day putting ad creatives, sorry, not ad creatives, just content together for socials. I think that's really important. You could rent out a local studio just so that you've got that as a backdrop, and spend the time figuring out what you can do with that money to put content together that you think will resonate with people on social media. So that way you're approaching the best possible platform for fan generation, which is TikTok, but also Facebook and Instagram. You're approaching it in an organic way where you've put effort in because you've invested into it. And alongside that, to supplement, we also have paid advertisement that's running alongside it as well. In terms of timelines, I would suggest using that £200 worth of content organically, seeing what does and doesn't work the best. What does work the best, you then use that for your paid strategy. You use that content as your ad creatives going forward. Because if it performed well organically, there is a good chance that it should perform well through paid ads. So that testing phase that I'm talking about, which is typically the most complex part of what we do, isn't quite as difficult because we already have an idea as to what should or shouldn't perform well.
Mm.
We have a band recently called Sworn Amongst that are a client of ours. They've gone quite heavy on the organic social approach with both TikTok and Instagram, and they've had some successes. And they came to me and said, Dan, we're kind of a bit stuck beyond taking music video footage and snipping that down to 30 seconds. What else should we be using as our creatives? And I said, well, you've been very proactive on the organic social media side. What content have you put out that has done really well? Because if that did well organically, it probably will do well in paid ads. So they've sent all of this over to us for us to work with. And we were right. The content that performed well organically, when we've pushed that through a paid campaign, has performed better than everything else.
That's a great plan. And then second one was for kind of a bit more advanced band who has a few thousand followers on socials and say a few thousand listeners on Spotify, but they kind of hit a plateau. They perform in gigs, but are not gaining any more super fans.
Mm-hmm.
Would the plan be different for them? What would you kind of advise? Again, without giving up all your secrets.
Yeah, no, they're not secrets. It's common industry knowledge for the most part. I think that the approach would be very similar. To be completely transparent, the difference between a few thousand versus a few hundred is quite negligible in the grand scheme of things with respect to artists. If the band are active, as I mentioned earlier, having a QR code, maybe even business cards, where you have that QR code that links through to sign up to the newsletter. That would be really important for just straight off the bat starting to build that mailing list so that you can start to nurture those people that have had that real life experience of actually experiencing your live show. Because I've seen you in person, you're not just an internet band, they will feel much more connected to you. So nurturing that is really important. I also think that once you're at a few thousand, you are starting to move more towards PR being as valuable as digital marketing, because once you have got that small but real, genuine fan base, that's when you want to start to snowball the perception of the band, essentially. And that will happen through features and reviews and radio play, especially with the bigger hitters like the likes of Kerrang and Metal Hammer. It helps legitimize a band, as well as, of course, helps them be found by new listeners, but it legitimizes that band and helps them be perceived as a real band that the industry are championing, as opposed to a group of musicians in their bedroom just writing cool riffs.
Yeah, that makes sense. What is kind of the recent great success case example you're most proud of?
Oh man, there's quite a few of them. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go through a few for completely different reasons. So there's a band called No Love that are very, very new. It's a solo project of a guy who, and I'm not joking when I say this, I don't know who he is. His manager contacted me on his behalf. His vibe is that he wants to wear a different mask for every release that he does. The first track that he released was very catchy, very sort of commercial metal, I would say. Had a cool music video put together for it. He ran ads for that. And because Spotify had not ever had anything released from this artist before, the benchmark was just non-existent. It didn't really know what to do with it when this track came out, but it was very catchy, and we threw a good amount of ad spend into it, and we got the cost per conversion really low. So from our perspective, the campaign was running very well. What happened with that, though, was Spotify kind of got a bit confused and was like, there's a band here, they've never released anything, they've released their first ever song, but for some reason there's loads of people flooding from different websites to our platform to listen to this song, and they're listening to it all the way through, and they're saving it, and they're following the band, etc. This must be a really cool track. So it got pushed out into algorithmic playlisting. So we achieved around 10,000 streams for them in that month through our ads alone, but the algorithm pushed them out to an additional 50,000. Oh, wow. So they got 60,000 streams on their first ever track on Spotify, with no shady playlists or anything like that, just direct marketing through Meta and the help of Spotify acknowledging that people really like the track, picking it up and throwing it into the algorithm. So that did really well. They're going to be releasing a new EP, I think, towards the end of this year. Undecided. All bands are never correct when they talk about their deadlines and their release plans behind the scenes. Never, ever. I'll have a band telling me they're going to release in 2026 and it'll actually happen in 2029. But that's a good success story of sort of a smaller band that we've worked with. Bigger bands, two that spring to mind are Esoterica and Hacktivist. So Hacktivist have gone through a big lineup change. At this point, they only have one original member. In terms of the feedback that we saw from the fans across their socials, there was a reasonable amount of negativity. I think people thought the band were going to fall apart because they only had one original member, which is completely valid. So we ran a PR campaign for them to try and spin the narrative of a new chapter, as opposed to the band are falling apart, because the band are very much not falling apart. They're still very active. They're playing festivals, etc. So we pushed that out to press. We had uptake in Metal Hammer. We had uptake across the pond with the likes of Metal Sucks. We had some good coverage with Primordial Radio, BBC Radio 1, and many, many more, most of which the coverage being really positive about them moving into a new chapter. So that was good, because JJ, the vocalist, is a good friend of mine. He's the ex-vocalist of my previous band. And I wanted to ensure that I could do everything that I could to paint that positive narrative as
Mm.
opposed to what can very easily perceived to be as a bad one. And then finally with Esoterica, we ran a meta campaign for them last year in the run up to their LP release show. So they were planning on releasing their new LP and doing that at Shepherd's Bush Empire in London, which is a 2,000 capacity venue. They had an orchestra and everything. It was very, very, very cinematic, and they're an exceptional band. You should definitely go and check them out if you haven't done before. They're a prog metal band. They're great. But we ran a meta campaign for them, which was with the intention of pushing to DSP traffic, but also gathering that data that I was talking about earlier. That data was later utilized by the band, who are also very switched on from a marketing standpoint, to push for ticket sales, and they were able to sell out the venue, which was a big win for everybody involved.
That's amazing. That's a lot of good stories. I know Hacktivist, but I'll definitely check out the rest.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dan. That is all we have time for, but I will
Thank you for your time.
I will leave obviously all the details in the description here.